Again, the people who want to spread lies about the United Arab Emirates are making noise. That must be stopped. What they say is disinformation. This time, they came all the way to revisit the old case of the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. According to the Washington Post, the Emirates has planted a spying device with a close associate of Khashoggi before his murder. The type of device was the spying software known as the Pegasus software. One more time, this is a total lie. There has been an official investigation by more than one country into this case. None of them told of this espionage story. Second, the United Arab Emirates has nothing to do with the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Third, the Washington Post has been biased and not fair in many of its reports, including the case of Khashoggi. Fourth, why now?
Two things should be noted about the latest alleged revelations concerning the use of NSO software to spy on Khashoggi's wife. First, that the software is actually untraceable. So whoever claims that the software is being used has no evidence. So far, none of the claims against NSO presented in courts have actually been publicly shared. No independent experts outside organizations making these accusations have ever had an opportunity to examine devices allegedly infiltrated by this software. So even if those devices, cell phones, and so forth have been hacked, it's unclear who actually hacked them and for what purpose. Second, the issue of timing and why UAE is now being attacked. All of the organizations that are affiliated with claimants, with the people claiming that they have been hacked, they have roots in the Muslim Brotherhood, in Qatar, and also in big tech. Qatar and UAE are economic rivals. UAE is now aggressively catching up with Qatar in various spheres, including technology, including cybersecurity. And it's being perceived as an economic threat to Qatar's geopolitical interests, so it's doing everything possible to take it down, to cast aspersions on it. Second issue is the issue of cybersecurity industry. These interests, this collusion of various interests is looking to take control of surveillance in the private sphere. They simply do not want competition. They don't want companies, particularly Israeli companies, that are not working with Qatar or have ties with Qatar to be able to function in the United States. To that effect, some of these interests, such as the organization called Don Mina, is working with the State Department and advising the US State Department, which blacklisted some of these companies without any specific concrete evidence of them being a threat to US interests, simply on the basis of these allegations. And all the targets that are being alleged can be viewed as legitimate threats, both by intelligence agencies and by cyber security company. And finally, the most important factor is the competition by the big tech, such as Meta, formerly known as Facebook, Apple, and other companies that have their own cyber surveillance tools and aim to be the sole arbiters of online control over deciding who is a threat and who is not. They view these private companies as a competition and of course are looking for any use to shut them down. The Khashoggi story has been used against Saudi Arabia, against the Crown Prince, and of course against UAE and anybody perceived as being in any way allied with these two countries. For several years now, it waxed and waned over time. It is mostly a propaganda campaign based on deception and manipulation of human sources with no technical evidence tracing any of the software to the leaders of these countries. And in this latest story, what we see is an account that is not based on any technical evidence. It's also based on human sources, and human sources can be manipulated, they can be deceived, and they can be simply lying. So that's it.
In other words, while the Emirate is a good friend of the West and a close ally of the United States of America, she tries to establish many balances in her foreign relations. Recently, Abu Dhabi had contacts with Israel, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. It seems that there are many people who do not understand or comprehend what the Emirate is trying to do to bring peace and stability to the Gulf region. And suddenly, an American newspaper attempts to tarnish the good reputation of the Emirates by directing lies. No one cannot rule out bad motives in the publication of such a bad report. It is noteworthy to mention that many arrests were made in the case of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Expectedly, they made many confessions, but none of them refer to Hanan al-Attar. The Washington Post has designated as a mole spying on Khashoggi while in contact with an intelligence agency in the United Arab Emirates. Quite the opposite. When Khashoggi's story was announced, the United Arab Emirates made it known that it had nothing to do with his murder and that it wanted full transparency in the interrogation surrounding his death.
The Washington Post is literally a sister publication to Al Jazeera. It seeks to sow discourse to achieve its political desires. The Washington Post is now owned by Amazon's Jeff Bezos, who believes he was the target of the software. It is no coincidence that this Washington Post hit piece came out now. The headline states that this investigative article is about Jamal Khashoggi's wife. The Washington Post uses her as a supposed subject of the investigation, which is completely disingenuous. Only deep in this investigative article do we learn that Jamal Khashoggi was no longer with this woman. In fact, he was in Istanbul trying to get a divorce certificate and marry another woman, Hatice Cengiz. The article focuses less on this case and more on an overall attack on the software that protects people from terrorists. It describes its use by intelligence agencies around the world. The author, Dana Priest, previously revealed CIA and other government counterterrorist intelligence sectors jeopardizing the people who work for them to defend us. This is clearly misleading and irresponsible reporting with an agenda. The article states that Bill Marczak of Citizen Lab could not determine whether the spyware had successfully infected the phone. The NSO group has confirmed numerous times that the software was not on the phone, yet the Washington Post is spreading this conspiracy theory as a fact. The article talks multiple times about botched efforts to send a link to the phone to install the software. This again is disingenuous. Why would they have to do that if they had possession of her phone for so long? This is clearly a smear job against the leaders and governments of the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and even the United States, by people who have been scorned and by a newspaper with its own political agenda. Intelligence agencies must have the tools to track terrorists, to save lives. The Washington Post would rather let the Muslim Brotherhood, Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and other terror groups topple our allies and impose their warped ideology in those areas. It's imperative to read behind the headline and understand the reasons for this gross, one-sided hit job against our allies.
Those who brandish these lies do not know anything about the Emirates. It is unimaginable that the United Arab Emirates would conspire to kill a Saudi journalist. There is no interest for the UAE to get involved in his murder. It is illogical. In addition, the CIA report on the case of Jamal Khashoggi never referred in its draft or conclusion to any relationship implicating the United Arab Emirates in the story of Khashoggi, whether it is his life or his passing away. As a journalist, I consider the Washington Post a deliberate leak that happens occasionally to disturb the political atmosphere in many countries. Unfortunately, this creates problems for many. It shows also the arrogance and the bad ethics in the profession of journalism. The irony is that the Washington Post mentioned the use of an Israeli-made software that was planted by the Emirates to eavesdrop on Khashoggi. According to the British newspaper The Guardian, Shalev Yulu, the chief executive of the Israeli surveillance firm, told the US TV news program 60 Minutes in March 2019, "I can tell you very clear, we had nothing to do with this horrible murder." There is another fact that relates to the no use by the United Arab Emirates of this type of software technology. The Emirates does not need it. Finally, Khashoggi's career never intersected with anything the United Arab Emirates does. It is very irrelevant and irresponsible from the Washington Post to keep harassing the UAE. The Emirates will never be impacted by these false and fake charges. Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.